It's easy to look at the F-35 and think of it as just another warplane, a sleek, stealthy jet built to dominate the skies. But that's where most people are wrong. The F-35 isn't just a machine, it's a digital organism, a flying supercomputer that turns the air around it into a battlefield network. Developed by Lockheed Martin, this aircraft doesn't just fight, it thinks. Its radar doesn't simply detect enemies, it analyzes, predicts, and shares data across an entire combat grid. It can jam enemy sensors, hack communication signals, and even guide missiles launched from ships hundreds of miles away. Each variant plays a different role. The F-35A, built for speed and range, the F-35B, capable of vertical takeoffs on improvised runways, and the F-35C, designed for carrier dominance at sea. But their true power lies in how they connect. Dozens of these jets flying together don't just see the battlefield, they own it. Every pilot becomes part of a single, synchronized mind, feeding real-time intelligence back to command centers across continents. And now, that technology, once scattered across global bases, has been concentrated along one of the most volatile borders on Earth. Because when you bring 100 of these machines together on NATO's front line, it's not just an exercise. It's a message. A message powerful enough to make even the most fortified radar systems in Russia start to panic. But how did this massive deployment appear almost overnight? And why did Moscow have no idea it was coming? It began without fanfare, no grand announcement, no press release, just whispers from locals near southeastern Poland who noticed the skies rumbling a little more than usual. Over several nights, enormous C-17 Globemasters and C-5M supergalaxies started landing at Zash's air base, one after another, like silent giants touching down in the dark. Their cargo? Fuel trucks, maintenance units, radar arrays, and the unmistakable silhouettes of support crews who never spoke to the media. What they were building wasn't just a base, it was a fortress. By the time dawn rolled across the frost-covered fields, reinforced hangars were rising like steel monoliths. Fences extended for miles, and mobile radar systems began scanning the horizon. Then, without warning, the jets themselves appeared. Not in daylight, not with cameras flashing, but in total radio silence. One by one, the F-35s emerged from the clouds, their landing lights dim, their engines whispering into the frozen air. Each landing was calculated, each movement deliberate, as if rehearsed to perfection. Satellite images later confirmed what few on the ground could comprehend. An entire fleet of stealth fighters had materialized in the heart of Poland, right under Moscow's nose. It wasn't a training drill. It was the largest forward concentration of American stealth power since the Cold War. And when Russian radar screens started to light up hours later, no one in the Kremlin was ready for what they saw next. Just before sunrise, deep inside Russia's Kaliningrad region, radar operators began to panic. Their screens, usually calm grids of steady blips, erupted with chaos. Dozens of phantom signals appeared, vanished, then multiplied. One officer later described it as watching ghosts dance across the sky. Within minutes, air defense stations from Belarus to Western Russia were reporting the same nightmare. Stealth signatures moving fast, too fast to be tracked, then disappearing entirely. Something was jamming them, something powerful. At 4:30 hours, the silence shattered. 100 F-35s launched from Polish runways in synchronized waves, engines howling as they climbed into the icy dawn. Within moments, Russian radar networks went dark. Entire grids lost contact. Communication lines flickered out. The F-35s had activated their electronic warfare suites, flooding enemy frequencies, bending signals, and rendering some of Russia's most advanced defense systems useless. Inside Moscow's National Defense Control Center, alarms blared. Reports streamed in. False targets, vanished readings, unidentified aircraft. Then came the chilling confirmation. Multiple stealth contacts detected. Unknown intent. Interceptors scrambled from Chkalovsk Air Base. S-400 batteries powered up, but found nothing. The sky was empty, yet full of unseen movement. For the first time, Russia's famed air defense umbrella had been pierced, not by missiles, but by silence. And as panic spread through command channels, NATO was just getting started. While Russian commanders scrambled for answers, something extraordinary was happening across Europe. NATO's air network, long criticized for its fragmentation, suddenly came alive, and the F-35s were the heartbeat. These jets weren't just flying missions. They were sinking satellites, drones, and radar stations into one living, breathing intelligence web. Norwegian and Dutch F-35s joined from the north, British Typhoons from the west, and AWACS aircraft began circling Poland in near-constant rotation. In a matter of hours, NATO had built what analysts called a combat cloud, a unified digital battle space stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. For the first time in history, every Allied pilot, ship, and command post saw the same picture at the same second. Data from radar sweeps, electronic intercepts, and infrared sensors fused together seamlessly. The result was total awareness, the kind that makes traditional warfare obsolete. Russia's movements, radio signals, and even aircraft maintenance patterns were being tracked in real time. Every maneuver near the border was now under NATO's digital microscope. Inside Polish command centers, the display screens looked almost unreal, hundreds of glowing icons moving in perfect coordination, forming an invisible shield over Eastern Europe. It wasn't just power, it was control. And while NATO called it deterrence, Moscow saw something else, a rehearsal for dominance. Because when your enemy can see everything even before you act, the war has already changed. Inside the Kremlin, the atmosphere turned electric with fear and disbelief. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu reportedly convened an emergency session before dawn. Generals spoke over one another, each trying to explain how 100 stealth aircraft had crossed NATO's front line without a single alarm raised. Russia's S-400 systems, its pride, its shield, had gone blind. Within hours, MiG-31 interceptors were scrambled toward empty skies, while Kaliningrad's air defense divisions flooded command lines with static-filled transmissions. Nothing made sense. State media rushed to calm the public, calling it a routine NATO drill. But insiders knew better. Reports hinted that Russia's northern fleet had quietly shifted to heightened alert. Strategic bombers were readied, and several nuclear-capable aircraft were placed on standby, a move unseen in years. To Moscow, this wasn't a drill. It was a wake-up call. Across Europe, leaders reacted in sharply different tones. Poland's president called the deployment a guarantee of peace, while Berlin and Paris whispered concerns of escalation behind closed doors. In the Baltic states, the reaction was pure relief. For once, they said NATO's presence felt real. But in Washington, the message was deliberate: deterrence through dominance. Meanwhile, far from Europe, the world was watching closely. In Beijing, military analysts dissected every second of the operation. In Tehran, commanders warned that the precedent was dangerous. Because if the US could deploy 100 stealth jets to Poland overnight, what's to stop them from doing the same anywhere else? And that's when the question shifted. Was this truly an exercise, or the quiet beginning of something far bigger? Event as a readiness validation exercise, but military insiders called it what it really was: a strategic test of nerve. Satellite imagery in the days that followed showed more than just parked jets. It showed activity. Runways reinforced, fuel reserves expanded, and electronic warfare units setting up mobile command centers across Eastern Europe. The message couldn't have been louder. The US wasn't just visiting, it was positioning. Analysts began outlining possible next moves, each one more alarming than the last. The first, extended deployment, keeping the F-35s in Poland indefinitely. The second, forward strike drills, simulating air-to-ground attacks within reach of Kaliningrad. Then came whispers of live-fire exercises near the Suwalki Gap, NATO's most vulnerable corridor linking Poland to the Baltics. For Moscow, any one of these would be viewed as crossing the line. Behind closed doors, Pentagon officials insisted everything remained under control. But defense experts saw the shift immediately. NATO had demonstrated not just stealth, but speed, the ability to mobilize, strike, and dominate before the enemy could even react. And deep inside Russian command bunkers, one realization spread fast: deterrence had a new face, and it was invisible. But even as the skies quieted, one final question remained. Would the F-35s leave, or had the new front line of power just been drawn? By the time the last F-35 touched down and the roar faded into the Polish morning, the world had already changed. NATO had just proven it could project stealth power on a scale Russia could neither detect nor counter. Inside the Pentagon, analysts pored over flight data, electronic warfare logs, and radar returns, confirming what many suspected: Russia's Western defenses had been digitally penetrated without a single shot fired. That realization sent shockwaves through Moscow's military elite. The unthinkable had happened. Their most guarded region had been mapped, tested, and exposed. Kaliningrad scrambled to adjust. Artillery units repositioned, anti-air systems crept closer to the coast, and the Baltic Fleet began shadow patrols. But none of it mattered. The F-35s had already gathered the data they needed: every radar pulse, every frequency, every weakness. In that sense, the mission was over and successful. Across Europe, leaders spoke carefully, praising deterrence while quietly fearing what might come next. Because everyone understood the deeper truth: modern warfare isn't about territory anymore. It's about timing, information, and invisibility. The era of visible armies and predictable moves is fading. What's replacing it is far quieter, far faster, and far more unsettling. If this was only an exercise, imagine what happens when it's real. When the dust settled, nothing had officially changed. No borders moved, no treaties broken. Yet the balance of power felt entirely different. The US hadn't fired a single missile, but it had redrawn the boundaries of deterrence. For Russia, the sight, or rather, the absence, of those F-35s was a chilling revelation. Their most advanced radar systems, their layered defenses, their confidence in technological superiority, all undone in a single morning. The message from Washington was subtle but unmistakable: we can appear anywhere, anytime, and you won't even know it until it's over. Analysts now call it a strategic thunderclap, a demonstration that warfare in the modern era is no longer about who has the most weapons, but who controls the unseen battlefield, the digital sky. And while NATO framed it as deterrence, the reality was far bolder. It was a show of invisible dominance, the kind that shifts geopolitics without a single explosion. From Moscow to Beijing, military planners are rethinking everything, because the rules of power have changed. The next conflict won't begin with tanks rolling or missiles firing. It'll begin with silence and shadows moving where no radar can see. And if this was only the beginning, the question haunting every command center on Earth is simple: what comes next?